Okay, we are live. Welcome, everybody. This is Dr. Paul with the great and eminent Wizard of the Mind, Jeremy Fox, or
You're too
Wizard of
kind.
Trauma at the very least. And we are here approaching Halloween. I will tell you, Jeremy, you don't know this about me, my least favorite holiday. I know it's some people's favorite holiday.
Mm,
Um,
this
I
is going to be
like other
good. Okay.
I like other things, so I try to avoid it when I can. But
Mhm.
because we are approaching that, I thought it might be interesting dialoguing with you about the notion of horror. What is horror, and what does that mean to humans? And what is the real psychology of horror? And what do we do with it? And maybe even why do we celebrate Halloween? And how could it potentially benefit us to
Mm,
think of horror? So, of course, when I thought of horror, I immediately thought of Stephen King, the great writer and um screenwriter and movie maker. And I thought of his book on writing, and I thought he might have some sort of sophisticated way of thinking about what is horror, at least from a literary standpoint and human standpoint, in the form of characters that he develops. So let me share this with you. I didn't know this about him. He identifies three levels of horror. There's just regular horror, plain old horror, which he describes as graphic, unbelievable, and often physical. Terror, which is more in the mind, the fear of what might happen, built through imagination. And I think that's probably our most horrific experience of horror as humans, because we live with a sense of a future all the time, what might happen. And then gross out. He calls it gross out, which I don't like at all. And it's also probably why I don't like Halloween. Simple
mhm.
physical revulsion. Although there's a lot to learn from that type of horror, as he describes it too. And he says terror is the most effective and difficult to achieve because it relies on commanding the audience's imagination and empathy for characters to create suspense. So if you don't have imagination and can't spur it, and you don't have empathy and can't encourage it, you're not going to get suspense in your writing. He also suggests the purpose of horror is to provide here we go, a cathartic, safe way to experience and process our deepest fears and darker emotions. So a safe place to experience and process our deepest fears and darker emotions. I'm certain you're going to have something to say about that in terms of trauma, but let me quickly say that since I spent my life studying human courtship, and one of the steps of human courtship involves early on a developing passion between two people, and
Mhm.
one of the steps of passion developing is if they share danger together, where the male can do something to save the day and comfort her, and where she does something to inspire him. And it has to be obviously safe danger. And
Yes.
I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, but I promise it's
I love
valuable.
this.
All right. If you think of both Freud and Darwin, what do they have in common? They both talk about the importance of sex,
Mhm.
reproduction, in other words,
Yeah.
and Freud talked about the thanatos instinct, right?
Yes. The
And
death drive.
I'll eventually want to know what you think of the thanatos instinct, and how can that exist if we're designed to survive and live? But he had this thanatos, which
Mhm.
pertains to that which is dangerous and maybe even life threatening. So there's survival. So in a sense, both Freud and Darwin agree that survival and reproduction are twin drivers of what amount to today our instincts. Now, Carl Jung called them archetypes, but today they're called instincts. Behaviorists call them instincts. And I believe this is the exact same thing Stephen King is getting at when he talks of having a cathartic experience, but in a safe place, aka the movie theater, watching a horror film. And when I talk to males and females about human courtship as a model, and I talk about how there needs to be some experience of danger
Yeah.
because that's arousing. And arousal, if you think of the overall concept of what is arousal, it's the amygdala firing, it's the alarm bells of danger in the brain going off.
Right.
And think of arousal in this way. If it's the amygdala going off, is arousal occurring due to passion romantically, which is one of our most common ways of describing what is arousal? Or is arousal the alarm bell going off in a danger arousal way? So I think there's both a sexual arousal and a danger arousal. And
Mhm.
together there's this nebulous, you know, mixture neurologically where arousal is arousal is arousal. And what I'm getting at is, why would in decades past teenagers go to horror films together on a
Right.
date? It's arousing, but in a dangerous way. Yet, as Stephen King is saying, safe, because it's just a movie theater, right?
Right.
So danger arousal is intermixed with sexual arousal, and that's one of the drivers that can bring couples together. Like, say a man saved the woman
Yeah.
on the street at night when an assailant approached, and he saves her and he helps her and he
Right.
drives off the assailant. Well, that was quite dangerous,
Sure.
yet it was dangerously arousing. Got it?
Yes.
All right. So
Right.
that's where I would start with all this. What
Sure.
is Halloween? Why do people like Halloween? It's probably arousing in this way. Therefore, it's simultaneously sexual, simultaneously impassioning between young couples or old couples, any couples,
Sure.
any
Well,
daters.
there's a lot you can kind of parse from this. Hello to everyone joining, including Natalie. Here's what I would say. So, we know from research that excitement and anxiety are essentially physiologically identical. It's the labeling, the semantic sort of label that really makes a difference. And so, this whole new field of um, anxious reappraisal therapy that involves labeling anxiety as excitement and kind of coaching oneself and a therapist coaching to embrace the anxieties, excitement, that's very
Hmm.
new, and it's something we've discovered in our better understanding of the physiology of emotions in the body. Okay, so you make me think of a few things here, and so I like that you brought up a few minutes ago this idea of the couple that gets scared together. There's a sense of danger. You have to overcome something
Yeah.
together with your courtship
Yeah.
model. I mean, there's the study of the shaky bridge where men crossed a bridge that was stable or not, and 39% of men from the scarier bridge uh, called the interviewer afterward. Okay, compared to only 9% from the low bridge. Okay. Uh, So the men on the precarious bridge misattributed their fear-induced physiological arousal, which include racing heart, sweating, heightened alertness, to romantic attraction toward the woman. Okay, so misattribution of arousal is the term. So it causes people to make mistakes in identifying what's caused their aroused state. Okay, so that's a lot of
Right.
scientific mush. Now, where I think it gets interesting
I don't know how you
is
found that so quickly. That's amazing.
I appreciate that. Well,
That's quite good.
research is a talent its own, and I think one of the things we can consider is it's like what goes into the stew of relationships. Like, okay, so you have anxiety, you have this arousal. Okay, does it, at a certain point, what does it come from? Does that matter if there's long term compatibility? Not really. Like the couple that finds themselves and they have excellent communication, and maybe their first date went better, because there was a dose of danger, and they got together quicker, or they got together at all. It's like, oh well, if they
Right.
hadn't had
Right.
that, but they'd gone through courtship or an experience without danger, they just would have been slower. But they're still compatible on the sort of their values, their ideals, their hobbies. Which hobbies, couples don't do hobbies. That's a thing. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be everything together. Guys can like golf, women don't have to like whatever. Woman can like golf, men don't have to. Doesn't matter. But there's a lot of things that goes into compatibility. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the initial spark, the arousal, the attraction. So I
And
think
one
you
little
move,
sub step of a
please.
step of human courtship
Right.
doesn't amount to the entirety of human courtship. That's why I believe there are steps, just like animals in the wild or
You nailed
fish.
it.
The fish needs to wag its tail a
Yeah.
certain way, or there's not going to be mating and this sort of thing. But there are numerous steps or sub
Yeah.
steps, I believe, for human courtship. This is
Yeah.
just one little principle, but
Yes.
it's a core one. And it's an important one, I think, because if you can't generate passion in novelty for a new
Sure.
person in your life in dating, I mean, it's not likely to progress. Just like it won't for fish, it won't for horses, it won't for dogs progress
Yeah.
unless
Right.
the steps are done sequentially,
Sure.
generally,
Yeah.
in a way that's going to, lead to more attachment and connection.
Yeah.
But my what I was wondering about is, I mean, I
Yes.
think we're leading there now.
Sure.
What is it
Reset
about
me.
Halloween? Why do people care
Sure.
about Halloween?
Yeah.
And I recall, like, throughout, much of my life, it was a time for dating, and it was a
Mhm.
time for meeting new people and for parties and for fun. And I suspect that the reason that why isn't it just like some death cult where people go to funerals or something, or they go to the cemetery and they don't go to parties, they don't have fun, they don't socialize. I think it's this principle that danger and death and surprise carry with it this amygdala triggering. I don't want to center just on the amygdala, but this impassioning, arousing, triggering experience
Sure.
that you just described it as. Sometimes it was misattributed, like in that experiment with the bridges, it was misattributed. But I'm
Sure.
saying it's not misattributed if that's why people are going to horror movies on dates. And that's why they're going to parties on Halloween. They
Sure.
enjoy the arousing stimulation of it, which is a fundamental for finding romance. So there.
Well, so I think there's a lot we could say. I mean, when we talk about and you made me think of this, you brought up Freud and Darwin and their sort of dual concerns of life of mating and survival. And I think when you look at Halloween, you've answered your own question there with the idea that if it's a date, the idea of staying alive through a scary story with a pretty girl or with a handsome guy it really gets to both those things, right? Like surviving and romance. So if you're on a
Yeah.
romantic date and you survive a scary ride, there's the excitement of being alive and the excitement and the thrill of new love. And so I'm reading a lot into it, but that's what you and I do as analysts,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say anything that involves, I mean, you could get very primal, like you could look at the idea of anything that's kind of like a festival of death and survival, like the reminder of Memento Mori of Halloween. You see lots of skulls, you see lots of pumpkins that kind of have a face and then decay. There's a lot of symbolism of fear and of avoiding danger and death, and that only the living can do that, right? So
Yes.
this idea of giving death its due, giving fear and trauma and terror, it's recognition as an almost a yearly thing. And I think, I mean, or even in sort of de-individuating anonymity, putting on a costume and acting out, externalizing, right? Putting on the ego state of something terrifying, identification with the aggressor, being the monster, purging that, and then going back to daily life, right? That's a way of getting rid of your neuroses for a night. If you're more of a, timid person, you can vicariously live out this sort of um, power fantasy through Halloween and watching a slasher film with someone in it who's very violent. You could say, "Oh man, I wish I had the ability to be maybe not a monster, but you know, when if people watch these figures, they wish they could be more assertive. They wish they could be this, or they wish they could be the brave, handsome warrior like." And I'm not sponsored by anyone, but like Ash, like Bruce Campbell from Evil Dead, like be the hero in the story who
Or
saves
any
everyone.
for the entire audience, any Tom Cruise movie has
Yeah,
that.
of
Any
course.
Tom Cruise movie, there's a romantic interest, or James Bond for that matter. There's a romantic interest, there's danger, there's an
Yeah,
impossible task. Will he achieve the task? The woman supports him, he
yeah,
achieves the task, and then she's in love with him and this sort of thing.
yeah.
Um, one thing that I wanted to go back to is that, I mean, there's like a million different directions we can go
And
in
I
this.
like scary
Y-
stuff, so we're well matched on this
Yeah,
because I can
right.
tell you why I like
Exactly,
it.
right. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
always thought you have a little bit of a Batman nature to you, and I'm more of
Yep.
a Spider-Man. I'm more
All
of a
right.
Spider. I think you're a Batman, and and Batman
Probably
loves the
true.
dark. Probably loves Halloween. Um, but what I wanted to go back to is again Stephen King, because you brought up this
Yes.
idea of memento mori. Remember that death exists. Death will come to us all.
Mhm.
And although Halloween can be this play acted temporary part of the year where somebody gets to experience something and they're a quiet, timid person,
Yes.
remembering that death exists also spurs us all back into life, resisting that ending.
Yes.
Remembering that life is acting, meaning taking action. Life is, you could see life as a series of decisions, and decisions imply effect. They imply an action will occur or could occur. And so life really is a series of actions or decisions ultimately. And if you're getting a little too passive, more prone to depression, I notice a lot of more depressive people for some reason tend to like Halloween. I don't have a scientific research study on that to quote you. It's just something I notice. Um, what they used to call in high school the goths, or the people that were more dark in their attitudes, more nihilistic people tended to like Halloween, as I recall, in high school. But
Yeah.
but this remembrance of death ought to not just give us a chance for working out traumatic experiences and fantasies, but
Sure.
or to be aroused and excited, but it ought to spur us to resist death through re-entering life more vigorously and doing more actions, making more decisions,
Agreed.
even if they're faulty, we can learn from them, and that's the whole point. Is I was once told by a professor in psychiatry when I asked, "What is the remedy for ambivalence?" Because a lot of patients have ambivalence about, are they going to quit substances? Are they going to fully engage in therapy? Are they going to get into a relationship, get out of a relationship? They're ambivalent. What's the cure?
Yes.
And the professor told me, it was Mike Moran. And the professor told me, "Oh, the cure is make any decision. Just make any
Yes.
decision, even if it's but not like a ridiculous, foolish decision, but any reasonable decision is the cure for
Yes. I
ambivalence.
have something
Get
that
off
yes.
your butt, start moving,
Yes.
right?"
You
So
have
this
to do it. Yeah.
memento mori thing
Move forward.
is a remembrance, not just of our ancestors, that death will come to us all, but to spur us back to life, the exact opposite of death. And guess what? Stephen King has a masterclass in it, in what I believe was a short story, but it was made into a TV film, not a theater film. You may
Okay.
not have seen it, but it was called the Langoliers.
I thought you were gonna mention that. Yes. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And the Langoliers is this exact concept of, maybe it's his masterclass on this one exact concept of the memento mori. that death will come to us all, and you need to get off your butt and keep moving, or the Langoliers, these buzz saws, come and just chew up reality around you.
Yeah.
Not only will you die at the hand of these buzz saws, but you will be annihilated. You won't exist along with reality
Right.
around the Langoliers. I think the
Mhm.
Langoliers is a really good cinematic experience of the need to keep moving, no matter how slowly, moving forward in your life. And maybe
Yeah.
Halloween is about that.
Well, there's a lot to say about that. For one thing, so let's really tie it all together. Let's bring horror and trauma in. I mean, so when you talk about ambivalence, you could talk about trauma and this idea that someone could be frozen essentially and ineffective, impotent in their own life. And so one of the things that you because you really got me thinking here. So, what is fear and horror in form of a movie or a haunted house? It's a story. It's a story with a beginning, middle, and an end of danger, middle of the story where it looks like things are really ramping up, and you've got toward the end with the all is lost moment, and then you've got victory. So, what do you have? You have a linearity, you have a narrative and a tale of passing through some sort of villainous entity, either one that represents righteous judgment, one that represents the danger of folly, right? And I need to write a whole thing about my taxonomy of the different
Yeah.
kinds of villains. And I need to like read just
Oh,
enough to have better
oh, nice.
language. Thank you. But then I
Yeah.
need to like not completely have it based on something else. So keep
Yeah.
it original enough. But basically, it's a story. Okay. And it's a
It's the
story.
unknown. There's
Yes.
always the Jungian Joseph
Yes.
Campbell hero's journey concept of the story doesn't begin until the hero is usually not voluntarily going into the unknown.
Of
It's
course not.
not as believable. He is
Right,
thrust into the unknown.
right.
Like even Luke Skywalker, the ultimate story analysis of the
Uh-huh.
hero's journey is he's hanging out rent free, living with his aunt and uncle in the desert. And he meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's like, "Hey, bud, I got a lot of knowledge for you. Why don't you come follow me?" And he's like,
Right.
"Nah, I'm going to hold off for now. That's not for me for now." I'm paraphrasing. And
Yeah,
back home he goes. But when he goes back home, everything is torched. The Empire
of
has destroyed
course.
the village, killed his aunt and uncle. So he is thrust into the unknown. So
Yes.
these stories always begin with being thrust into the unknown. Otherwise, it's
Right.
not a story. If we know the ending already, I mean, we're not going to go see the movie.
No. Well, the unknown has to really be high stakes, right? So that's and again with trauma, trauma is exposure to threatened injury, violence, or even death. And that's either to oneself or witnessing it. And
Yes.
so when you look at the vicarious danger of a horror movie, okay, so that's basically willing exposure to possible trauma. Okay. So that's number one. And that's why trauma is in its own class as something that is very dangerous to the self, to the bodily integrity or mental integrity through seeing something very, very, very dangerous. So it isn't just I was disappointed in some way and now I hold on to it. That is called disappointment. That is called maybe a developmental um block or fixation, right? I think we've lost the term fixation in the mental health world because we've lost a lot of analytic language. And so now people have to reinvent terms that already exist. But I'm really convinced, and I just now thought of this, that the idea of being fixated on something has been replaced with the term traumatized, and we've lessened what trauma means. And so basically,
Mm, yeah.
this idea we
Yeah.
we like to have dosed as in the dose of psychiatrist giving medication, right? You don't start, you titrate, especially with a really strong drug. You don't give the patient the entire dose that you want to level up to. You give them something smaller and then work up. So,
Right.
and so some patients are like, no, I want it all right away. Blah, blah. Nope, can't do that. That's not how the body works. So same thing with overcoming fear. People want a story where they can face it enough. And so is interestingly EMDR therapy. It's so funny. I've loved scary movies since college where I also knew I wanted to do psychology, whether in the therapy world or the research world, and I've done both,
Yes.
but mostly landed in the therapy world, obviously. But um,
Could you explain to me why, like, I mean, as a person,
please,
you see a one of Stephen King's levels of horror. There's just regular horror,
yeah,
which he's a master of. There's terror,
yeah,
which I'm interested in that because that's really psychological. And then there's
sure.
gross out, which I'm not interested in at
I'm not
all.
really
So
interested
when
in that either, to be honest. That's not
so
my
when you
favorite.
saw this, say you're in college and you see a horror film, you have anticipation going into it. Something drew you to want to see it.
Yeah,
I saw hardly any. I didn't like them.
yeah.
But then you come out. How do you feel? Like, are you transformed in some way? Like you as a person, how did you feel coming out of a horror film in college?
Well,
What did it do for you, in other words?
man, that's a great question. All right, it's almost like you have experience interviewing people. Anyway, because you do. You know what? I'll paint the picture. So
Yeah.
back in the day, it'd been suggested that I watch, oh man, this particular series. And since I was a psychology student and I was all up in the psychology world, I loved my professors. I just was living psychology, and people knew it around me. But I was kind of like the artsy psychology guy. Like I drew, I had the long emo hair. I mean, not a lot's changed, I
Right.
guess, in some ways. So I had
Did
friends
you
who
wear
were,
a French beret and have like a long cigaretto?
no, I had like hoodies and the black and red stripes though of kind of the emo. Yeah, anyway, no, that's funny. But somebody recommended I watch the Saw series,
Oh,
and
oh, God.
they suggested it because, and hear me out, they suggested it
Okay.
because they said, "Oh, well, it's very
It's moral,
psychological."
right? It's
And yeah, and the
moral.
villain
Yeah.
is very
Yeah.
like there's an interesting twist in the first movie that I will never spoil. If you haven't seen it, then just see it if you have the stomach for it. But the antagonist has a twisted morality and it's very existential. So I'm also very philosophy minded. I enjoy looking at
Okay.
the intersection of psychology and philosophy. So you asked me a very specific question. Okay. So let me get to it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was, what happened? What did you feel like when it ended? Well, when it ended, I felt like I'd been on a ride, so there's probably some kind of a come down effect of high tension and release, right? So a release of tension, that's probably in some way, habit forming, not in an addictive way, but so there's probably some endorphins. And I'd done it socially. So this is crucial too, as I was watching it with friends and we talked about, oh, wow. So that was the decision point there. Or, oh, so how, no, this is how the antagonist is thinking. And this is what,
Hmm.
someone would do there. And so there was this sort of, and this was a very big thing of my college life of, engaging in discussion about some common stimulus. Like if we'd gone to a comparative religions class, like talking about it afterward at a cafe together, um, watching a horror movie, getting tense, seeing what's happening, and then afterward talking about what we thought was going to happen or what it was that we like. How could that have ended differently if their character had thought differently or had their wits about them more? It was very interesting because it's the kind of stuff. It's almost like a case study, right? And there's also a very bare examination of humanity that horror offers of what are people really gonna do? How are they
Hmm.
really gonna act when the chips are down?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's you're like an investigative reporter of the mind in a way by doing that because you're wanting to know what is the real nature of the person that you're dealing
Yeah.
with. You can't know
Well,
unless there's risk, at least
and
risk,
yeah, and
probably danger.
that's somewhat of a point in the Saw movies is and in other ones. I think Saw slasher movies walk so Saw can run. Cause see, I'm ruined on that. I can't just watch standard Friday the 13th movies and be like, "That's amazing," because it's all basically set up
Yeah.
to be, I don't wanna get demonetized by saying the K word, but an unaliving box of like, "Oh, they're just gonna be unalived in different ways." Like, I don't really wanna see that. I would
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
see something interesting, and so, horror is also a metaphor much like sex is. I mean, death can be metaphor so, there's a movie called I can't even really talk about this probably without getting demonetized or binged or dinged.
Well,
I don't know.
why don't I tell you this movie? This will be okay. It won't
Yeah, yeah.
be
And we
a
got a good
problem for
comment
the
too.
algorithms. But
Yeah.
the last horror movie, technically horror movie I saw was Richard Rodriguez's Hostel.
Oh man, that's like
And
Saw. Okay.
yeah,
Is
I mean
that?
that's the close. Yes,
Oh,
and
you
that's
talking
the
about
close.
Eli Roth? He had a hand in that too.
Eli Roth. Yes, that is
He's
the closest
amazing.
I have come to, a true horror film that I
Yeah,
voluntarily saw because I read about it. And
yeah,
all three of Stephen King's levels of horror were in it. There was like
yeah,
definite regular horror. There was what I liked was not liked, but what I found enlightening was terror. The psychology of
yeah.
terror was definitely
Absolutely,
suspense, most suspenseful film I've seen. And then Gross Out was definitely part of it too, and
a
I didn't
hundred
like
percent.
that part of it, but it had all 3 built into it, and also moral lessons, and also
Yeah,
greed versus adventure, and shouldn't young people be able to adventure their way through Europe, which I did numerous times.
yeah,
Many of us did, and
right.
what a way to latch on to our horror and terror
Yeah.
than by calling it hostile, where we all have stayed throughout the world, let's say.
Well, I
Yeah.
haven't done that yet. Maybe I mean, we could say what impacted that. I mean, among other things.
Yeah.
Geez, great stuff, man. Yeah,
Eli Roth.
Eli Roth has a lot of interesting ideas. I mean, as a Jewish American, he's also done a lot of good commentary on stuff. I mean, I generally find his stuff to be pretty cool and for him to be pretty insightful. He did a
Yeah.
movie called Thanksgiving that was really well done in 2023. It was a very well done Thanksgiving horror movie, which is wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think also the idea of escaping. Okay, so the idea of desensitization, because see, when I was a teen, well, I would say so. Okay, culture goes in waves, and so culture has progressed through different waves of what it means to face things, and so the wave of the edgy, face everything, never be naive or innocent. That was too far, right? I remember that era. And the idea of like being desensitized was kind of associated with grit. And I think actually
With grit.
desensitization, yes,
Uh-huh. Okay.
desensitization is really associated with
Okay.
masculinity to a point. So I think,
Stoicism.
yeah. So I mean, if you think about EMDR therapy, I have to say this, I cannot forget this. The EMDR therapy is basically guiding a client through their own internal horror movie and out the other side into their desired present. I mean, and it's amazing that my arc of professional development went through, loving psychology and then finding a therapy that's essentially, and I've never really thought about it that way until very recently, that like, oh, well, EMDR therapy, where you have somebody imagine their past memory, the most upsetting part of it, the
Right.
negative thought about themselves associated with it, and you have them move through it mentally is almost like a mental haunted house. It's like a mental horror movie.
Yes.
But it's not sadistic. The important crucial part is, and I think that's why a lot of horror movies aren't sadistic. The ultimate goal is a reminder that you can survive. That,
Yes,
yeah, this
and
is all very scary, but you
that's
can
what I
make it
feel,
through.
Stephen King stories and Eli Roth, at least Hostel as an example, is set apart from other, more mundane horror films. Not that
Sure.
I'm an aficionado of them, but I don't like them. But I think was
Right.
what was unique about Eli Roth's Hostel was it's not just gore for gore's sake. So it's not the third category of Stephen King's,
Yeah.
and it's not just suspense ending in tragedy, and the person is never going to overcome their horror, their trauma, but there's
Right.
a catharsis by way of the hero winning. So in a
Yes.
certain sense, every horror film that's a good horror film is going to be like a sports contest. You're rooting
Yes.
for the winner. You want you want the main character to survive. Why? Because the main character is you.
Yes,
You are
of
you are the
course.
main character in any
Right.
good film. You have
Yeah.
embodied that. You have embodied that character has. You have embodied that character. You have been
Right.
possessed by that main character. That's why they call it a character.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
like that.
it's a person with features and tendencies and a personality and a
Yes,
trajectory between life and death. They're on a trajectory, and you
I
have
like
now
that.
embodied them. That's what makes it
Yeah,
a good film. It's why we even go to films, which really
sure.
amounts to mentalization. It's observing ego.
Yeah,
We are we are being the observer in the eyes of the main character, and we're living that character's life if it's a really good film. And we're trying to avoid death.
yes, yes. Well, so I agree with you. I think we have to kind of destigmatize horror as this thing because, I mean, there are people probably who enjoy it for the wrong reasons. I mean, there's people who are addicted to smut books now. There's a whole epidemic of trying to make romantic fantasy or romantasy books as lurid as possible, and it's gotten very out of hand. And there's been numerous videos about it. So anything to an extent, like, does that mean that it's bad to indulge in romance fiction? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying there's a real spectrum of what is adaptive for you to be engaged at, and facing your fear and even being able to laugh at some forms of fear or challenges can be very adaptive. So I like this theme. I want to read Michael's comment. I
Sure,
think
yeah.
horror films expose us to the grotesque, supernatural, unusual, or wrongful death, and as a threat to moral integrity, eliciting emotions of shock, disgust, gross out, as you mentioned, demoralization, depression, anger at the characters disbanding one another and leaving them vulnerable for individual encounter with the strange, for which the romantic date cannot abandon us during the exposure. Okay, so somebody romantically can't abandon you during the movie, I guess. Part of our moral resilience. Fear, terror, threat to physical integrity as an arousal seem to be different in subject matter and emotion aroused. I mean, okay, yeah,
Well, here's where that comment led me, because he mentions moral integrity, right? Which is
yes.
similar to what we were talking about that, and maybe one of the reasons you like horror films. I don't know exactly if this is true, but it seems that
You sound
they
messed up
re-
in the
they
head.
no, no, no.
I
What I'm
know.
saying,
I know.
no, you basically said it and agreed that it's
Yeah.
for you. It reveals the truth of underneath the truth of a person, of what really is this person. If a bus is headed toward a stranger, does that person throw themselves in front of the bus to save the stranger? What kind of person is that in
Yeah.
that horrific moment? But what
Yes.
Michael's comment made me think of is that we really should double back to the two things, the two general threads we said we were going to talk about at the beginning, and in the context of trauma. What is trauma? And you defined it very well in the original form, that there is a life-threatening situation. But I
Mhm.
worry about where we are going as a people in terms of trauma with a little t instead of trauma with the big T, which you said was like being provoked, or like minor things can be potentially felt as traumatic, genuinely
Yes.
traumatic by a person. They really can.
Absolutely.
Others can be offended and just they're latching on to a psychobabble terminology to up their status somehow, their power. They're using it for themselves to play the victim and claim they have trauma with a little t, and they weren't
Sure.
really traumatized. And I liked your term grit, because I was wondering, where does the slippery slope end and fall off the edge of the cliff for us if we can call trauma with a big T means life threatening scenario? Trauma with a medium T is divorce, bankruptcy, medical illness. Trauma with a
Sure.
little t can be virtually anything, like having a hangnail. Where does that end? Because it will then obviate the need for psychotherapy or treatment. Um, what good are we in trying to help members of the public that genuinely have trauma? If trauma gets so diluted and everyone claims to have it to equal degrees, it's a reason I do not like this new term CPTSD, complex PTSD, as if I have super PTSD on steroids, more so than little old you. I
Mm.
don't like that terminology. At least it's not defined well enough for the public,
I
because
would
all
love to see
traumas are
you debate.
traumas.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you debate someone on that because I think, and I don't mean
Brene
that. I mean
Brown.
that.
I'd like to debate Brene Brown for any reason,
I think you
for
would be.
on any topic.
I think
I'm
you'd be good
sorry,
with.
sidebar.
No, you're great. I think you'd be good with Janina Fisher or Bessel van der Kolk or somebody because I think the way they would describe that, and maybe this will help answer the question,
Yeah.
in a roundabout way, is there's this is the way I talk about it with clients. So you've got the fear of driving again if you had a terrible car accident where someone smashed into you and the car went flying and you're in it and you had a horrible flashbulb memory of that. Like the moment of impact, you saw the car coming up on you, and then you have to take time to desensitize that massive fear. But overall, you're pretty well functioning as a person because you grew up
Yes.
in a normal-ish family. And that can be PTSD. And you can have flashbacks of that terrible event. So CPTSD is usually used to refer to consistent childhood onward.
Multiple
Yeah,
multiple traumas.
developmental trauma of a
Right.
nature that
Right.
stops you from creating an adaptive
But guess
self-concept
what?
that I think.
Numerous people come into me saying, "Doc, I got CPTSD."
Yeah,
And no, they don't. By the definition that you just gave, it's that they're latching on to this badge of honor,
yeah,
victim
well,
honor, that they're going
right,
to have the super PTSD on steroids. I get what you're saying. I mean, that used to have a name. It used to be multiple traumas. It used to be
right.
multiple developmental traumas. That's more accurate to call it that than some new brand name of super
Well,
PTSD on steroids. Anyway, I don't want to
it
get on a
no, I think
soapbox
it
about that
yeah,
topic, but I feel it
go for it.
matters. Um,
Well, okay. So what was the
yeah.
question was how do we it's a good question. But let make sure I get it. The question is how do we as a culture
How
now look at
how do
trauma and
we,
say,
maybe it involved language and terminologies,
sure,
which I resist new terminologies, because
understandable.
what blogger made that up? Um,
Right.
but because we have terms that work and have worked for decades and they work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I guess my question is, it's back to the word grit,
Yes.
because when you were describing somebody in a car wreck and it was horrific for that person, and it would be
Yes.
for many people or most people.
Yeah.
Um, what about grit? Because I think grit, whether it's masculine or feminine encouragement or feminine strength, or
Mhm.
masculine masculinity, whatever it is, whatever grit is as a human trait, it needs to be in the trauma therapist, because if you only provide a person with a chance to process without providing grit,
Yeah.
they will never go anywhere. They will stay where they're at. They'll stay in their safe space. They may never enter an actual treatment. Grit
Yeah.
is the key. And I think grit is probably the key to preventing the slide downhill, the slippery slope
Yeah.
into anyone and everyone has autism, Asperger's, ADD, PTSD, CPTSD, the super PTSD. They have it all. Everyone has it, because it's a badge of some kind of honor, backward honor, by way of being a victim. I think grit is what would be required to prevent that slippery slope. Because there are people, I was going to give you the personal example of being maybe a 12 or 13-year-old boy and my parents announcing their divorce. That was horrific.
Sure.
For me, that was indeed horror. Even though it wasn't a death, it wasn't a threat on life, it didn't qualify for the trauma with the big T, old style. But for me as a 12-year-old boy, it was horrific. It was horror because it meant potential annihilation. What happens to a family if it breaks apart?
Right.
Are they in the child's mind? Are they
Of course.
annihilated? Are you homeless? Will robbers come and kill you? Who knows?
Who knows? Right.
So, and Stephen King, back to him, Stephen King speaks in his second level of horror of his three levels of horror by calling it terror because it requires the imagination and the future. A form of fear, he says, where a creator uses imagination to instill fear in the audience without showing the source. So it's the unknown future, and it's your imagination needs to be big for there to be this kind of horror called terror.
Right.
So, but I think grit on the part of a therapist is what prevents that slide downhill into meaninglessness of terms, of
Mm.
terminology. Grit.
Yeah, I
We
like
found
that.
at Columbine, I responded because I was a resident with Jefferson County. I was a psych resident during Columbine. And the day after Columbine, we all go out to the school, the original horrific American event. We go out to the school thinking at the time, you immediately debrief traumatized
Yeah.
people. That was the thinking of the day. You
Yeah.
provide immediate services, immediately start processing. No, nobody showed. Nobody was there. I mean, that I could see. Nobody wanted to get treatment. And then 7 years later, that's when you started to see a trickle of people who had gone off to college, got married, started a life, had a child. Now, 7 years later, now they're coming back for the first time to go
Yeah.
over the trauma and do EMDR, do treatment for it. So there does need to be this buffer zone of regaining your balance after what we are titling in this talk, the horrors of real life,
Yeah.
Columbine being one of them. Um, so you need that buffer to pay the bills, finish your degree, keep yourself stable, your feet are on the ground.
Yeah.
Then eventually you will need to process to have a good life because it's still going to be operating you in some way, somewhere in your unconscious mind, at least. The traumas will still be operating your behavior. So
Mm.
it needs to be processed eventually. What will bring that person into commitment to look at the demons, to look at the monsters? It would be, I think, the grit, either of the person or of the therapist or both. There needs to be this grit that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think that therapists can get squeamish on things. Um, and I think we have to balance like anything else. We have to reach that middle zone of not, and we've talked about this idea before of the mean, the golden mean, that not having a vice of excess or of deficiency, like
Deficit. Yeah.
deficit, right? You've got cowardice is the deficit of bravery, but foolhardiness and bravado,
Is
right?
too much bravery.
I
Yeah.
think when we look at grit and we look at what you have to teach someone, like, yeah, someone could have been through one of the most abusive romantic relationships ever. And if they ever want to love that way again, or even be emotionally close in that way, they
Yeah.
have to start building back through, uh, um, you could call it sequentially, hierarchically developing friendships of, okay, so you were able to be reliable with this much about me, or and to this degree. Okay, well, I'm going to trust you a little more. So it's cumulative. It's incremental, very crucial that it's incremental. So it's that idea that, again, I'm going to move forward and I know now what part of this is what a red flag is, what a green flag is, and what confusion is, like where I need to just gather more data. I think as trauma therapists, you have to always keep in mind clients want to grow and they want more from life. And
Yes.
we go wrong as therapists when we have this idea that stasis and staying the same is even really that possible. Because if you're not growing in our world today, you're at real
Yeah.
risk of losing what you have. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. More
not to
than ever.
sound dark, but and I don't think it has to be dark. I think people can discover that they're capable of much more than they thought, and not in a woo-woo way that isn't real, but in a way of, well, why work on your fears and why work on things that come up and throw you off? Well, because if not, then you won't be able to take the action you want. I mean, the freeze response, right? Like some people's threshold to get to that freeze response is very low clinically. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, man, that when someone can't do hardly anything, and we're seeing this in younger generations, and some of this might be some you could call it curmudgeonly humbug of that younger generation. I get that. But what do you do if everything you can do is in the screen? Like, well, you don't develop as many social skills. And so there's a need to desensitize to rejection now more than ever of, you know what, it's okay if someone doesn't respond the way you want. What you have to do is say, that was their mood or that person's not for me because they're not friendly or they're not friendly to me or whatever. Like there's a situation going on that you're not aware of, or they're just not interested in talking. And it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And it just, the grit, like therapists teaching grit, and that whatever your treatment plan goal is, you got to be pursuing it. I think we have to remind ourselves of that. And this idea that it's okay to not know and to be disappointed. That doesn't mean that you won't get what you want. S
Yeah. Wow. Uh, that was quite a rant, but a very good one.
Well, I thank you.
Everybody liked it. Yeah, upholding the first, has a couple things to say about that, and I like this. He says, "Just because you're victimized doesn't make you a victim.
I
Being a
like
victim
that a
is a
lot too.
choice." I I think that is true. I agree with that. Um, and that's what we're talking about. But I think by grit, I frankly I like the word paternalistic.
Okay.
Whether it's coming from a male or female therapist doesn't matter to me. It's pushing someone to go out into the world and you're gonna be okay. I got your back. I'm watching,
Sure.
but you gotta do it. You gotta be the one to do it. It's coaching, it's pushing somebody. It's, what they used to call an active therapist, has grit. I think that's an essence of a trauma therapist. But what I wanna go back to is this notion that, the 2 things that we talked about at the very beginning before we
Sure.
even got on here.
Yes.
What is horror? And
Okay.
I told you, because the brain is like computer hardware and the mind is like software. When I look
Yes.
at software, which is psychology, I always see it through the prism of the triune brain model and the biopsychosocial model. So the bio is the brain chemistry, the circuitry, the brain itself, the tissue. The psychology is like the software that runs on the brain. It's the mind. And then sociology is who knows what. It's all the randomness out there and it changes every 5 minutes. It's our environment. Those two prisms are what I always look through everything through. So when I thought of, we're going to talk about horror, and I've never talked
Mhm.
about that before. I've thought about it a little, but not a lot. And I quickly realized, for me, the word horror is not an emotion. You could say maybe there's an anxiety component to it. There is a fear component to it, especially in terror leading up. through suspense to actual horrific traumatic things in people's real lives. But horror is a bodily felt level experience, let's say,
Yeah.
and I put it right next to the same bodily felt experience that has been called disgust. Like disgust can lead to vomiting, it can
Yeah.
lead to running, it collapsing, the body going into shivers, and it's a bodily reaction to an experiential situation. And I think horror is the same as disgust in that route, or in that light, which makes them, in my mind, reptilian brained,
Okay.
meaning they are automatic instinctual responses to something in the environment that is horrific or disgusting in the case of disgust. So they're not just emotions. They're not mammalian brained only. They're
Okay.
reptilian brained in
Right.
nature. And I thought that was important to say. And then the second angle on all of this was when we're talking about horror, and if we're going to talk about Stephen King, and if we're around Halloween time, then the subject is monsters. And that brought me right back to the very beginning of any experience I had training in psychiatry, which was as a medical student, having a professor who's now deceased, and his name is Horatio Fabriga. And
Mhm.
when I met him, I thought it was interesting. I was like, what is your sub specialty research you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm an anthropologic psychiatrist." And I'm like, "Well, what is that?" And he said, "Well, frankly, in short, I study vampires. I guess you could say I'm a vampire hunter psychiatrist." And I'm
Right.
like, that's awesome. What what exactly is involved there?" And he goes, "Well, what it means is I've studied world cultures for decades on the matter of what do monster myths teach a citizenry psychologically? And the
Right.
answer is pathologic narcissism.
Yeah.
That there are monster stories, vampires, werewolves, zombies throughout all human history, mummies, throughout every world culture, today and in centuries and millennia past. There have always been monster stories told in every world culture, even those completely separate from the rest of the world, like isolated islander populations. They have monster myths, and this is what he studied. And what he found as the commonalities are in the lore. Things like a vampire can't see themselves in a mirror. Well, a pathologic narcissist is in denial of their behavior. They can't see their behavior. Sometimes others can't see them. Sometimes they're invisible. They're manipulative. They're tricky. They die in the light of day. When morning light comes, the vampire evaporates. That's daylight.
Right.
That's the truth. The light of the truth eliminates all their lies and manipulations. A stake through the heart is a direct confrontation with truth to a narcissist. So his summation for me was the reason he was in psychiatry, at least interpersonally, what he told me is because it's so very interesting that lore, mythology, and human stories, that our minds digest stories, they run on stories, we
Yeah.
grow by way of stories, and that these monster stories are among the most important we could possibly study and learn because they teach us what is narcissism, how do you not become it, or how do you not
Yeah.
stay it as a
Yep.
vampire. Don't get bit. How to not get bit. How to not transform into a vampire. How to take a vampire and either eliminate them, meaning go no contact, get the narcissist out of your life,
I love
or
that.
how do you stop them with the stake through the heart? That's the truth. Confronting them with truth. And what are all the techniques that a society can learn, no matter whether they're an isolated islander society or they're in the Western world or what have you. Um,
I agree.
yeah,
Yeah. I balk a little bit at this idea, and it's not from you. This is that
Yeah.
we don't need labels, we don't need blah blah blah, we don't need diagnoses. It doesn't really matter. Well, it's funny because I hear it in opposite ways. I don't think for yourself as a person, you need to live by a label you've been given. I think you need to try to transcend it. And we know for a fact that you can. We know that, for instance, if you no longer meet the criteria of borderline personality disorder, you don't have it. Right.
Right.
So,
Right.
on the other hand, though, oh, we don't need labels to understand, the behavior of people with personality disorders or blah, 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 whatever. It's like, well, so when we talk about psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder, when we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, it helps you to understand as someone on the outside what is likely going on. And it helps you to stop beating your head against the sand and trying to go at things from an incorrect, possibly, tact. So, because all of what you just said made me think that because it's like, well, so if
Yeah.
someone is only happy when they're extracting emotional sustenance from you or
Right.
engaging in drama, right?
Right.
Like theatrics and making you, um, cater to them, to their flagging self-esteem. They refuse to do work on themselves. I mean, it's good to know that. You need to know that that's happening and look at the pattern instead of wistfully hoping, "Oh, it'll get better if I'm just more for them. If I shrink more." It's
Well,
not the
I got a
answer.
thought on that. Just to
Please.
just to clarify, I'm not against labels. I'm very for labels because
Oh, I don't think you are.
we
Yeah.
can't do anything if we don't have labels. I'm not against
Bingo.
labels. I'm against neologisms.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right.
That's what I'm really against because what blogger made that up in 2022 when it already existed for 70 years and we've
Well,
been
right,
trained at
marketing.
the other
Marketing's
word.
biting off
It's
more than
marketing.
it's
It's
good.
battles of marketing.
Sure,
So,
right.
my answer for that has always been it's almost like what is a quantum approach to anything, whether it's quantum physics or say quantum psychology.
It's a good question.
It would mean you need to apply a label to a general trend of behavior, or there's nothing to treat. You got to put a label on a thing, or there's nothing to treat.
Sure.
However, you need to not disrespect the unique individuality of an individual by saying there is a bell curve. So the
Yeah,
label is the mean, the bell curve is the bell curve. Without the mean, there's no drug to take that'll fix you. There's no psychotherapy that's going to help. There are no words to even say to you. There's no cure if
mhm.
you can't label a thing, a behavior, an illness name, a diagnosis, in other words. But you got to also have the bell curve, and that is the answer for those who rebel against the idea of labels and say you can't label me. I, yeah, I refuse to be labeled. This diagnosis that's been
Yeah,
made. Because you can respect the individual person and say, well, you're unique. You have your own. You have all the features that qualify at the mean for the label, but you are not
right.
at the mean. You are two standard deviations above in your success ability and your personal functioning, or maybe you're two standard deviations below. And yes, you are experiencing something more horrific per diagnosis name than another person
Mhm.
with the same
Yeah,
diagnosis. You're unique. But the key is that there is a bell curve. Everything about us is on bell curves. And everyone forgets that. They think because I'm three standard deviations out, I am the mean, and the world needs to listen to my lived experience of thinking I'm at the mean of some
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
diagnosis or lack thereof. So that's my soapbox on that matter. It's the importance of bell curves that allow treating people as individuals, unique individuals, but at the same
yes.
time they are labelable because they are on that bell curve. There is a
I mean, people
mean to the bell curve.
Look, I don't wanna get too spicy here. It's past 12:30 AM in the East here. I'm going to, though. I'm gonna say, if you wanna see how much people really don't like labels, hit them with a positive one. And the thing is, probably someone who has an aversion to compliments and has very strong pathological, introjected, critical part isn't gonna let them accept that label of, like, being intelligent or
Mm,
gifted or
yeah.
whatever. But other people, it's gonna be like, well, they just don't want they don't want any negative feedback. And what comes to me now, as you talk about label culture, is and CPTSD. So I respect your position. I have been in the trauma therapist bubble for long enough now to understand their lingo with CPTSD and why they think it's necessary. So I'm staying, as they would say, Switzerland on the sub. I'm staying
Yes. Stay
neutral,
out of it.
but
Stay out of it. My point with that, Jeremy, is I part of why I don't like neologisms or
I love
new
that word.
fancy new terms
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
some blogger made up, is that they can cloudy up and distract from I want to know everything. I want to
yeah,
know what exactly happened to you is what I want to know. And I
yeah,
don't want it to be like hidden behind this fancy I have steroid level PTSD and give an excuse to not look at it or to put a label on it and then put it in a box. I mean, that's one of
yeah,
the things about labels though. They lower anxiety. If we can label that dark unknown part of the forest that we're
yeah,
called upon to enter,
yeah,
to go
exactly.
on an adventure,
Yes,
it's great to be able to label a thing because it makes it feel safer. It makes it known instead of unknown. But
yes,
if somebody's coming to you
absolutely.
for treatment, they're an unknown. That's why they're coming to you.
Well, so no, and I don't at all look. Here's what I'm gonna say on that, and I'm not arguing. I think
Yeah.
here's what's concerning to me because it really is. This will be a good clip for the audience. We'll see. Put this one on the old. Well, I won't name any other websites. I don't want to get in trouble for that by Substack here. But here's what I'll say. So, look, I don't think everything was figured out in the era of psychoanalysis. I mean, we didn't have a EMDR yet, so how good was it? Just kidding. But I do think that the idea that a label so why do we do all this? Well, insurance. And why do we do all of that? Like, we need to be able, because there's still too few therapists for the need, even with people getting 2-year degrees. I have a 2-year degree, I have a master's. Have I done extensively more postgraduate work to the degree that I've published a dissertation? Yes, I have. Has everyone know? Do they have to? No. Um, Here's the deal though. You have varying levels of training and of awareness of what to even do with diagnoses. And so you've got like if someone just knows how to help someone build a personality, right? And they have the mental technology that they've learned from training and they have the intuition and they have all these other things that they have to marshal toward that end, they're not gonna
Yeah.
need to know, okay, that person has CPTSD. They're gonna be able to say, okay, this person has a truncated, very a stunted sense of self from horrific trauma. I'm gonna help them rebuild that now because I
Right.
have the training and the acumen to do it.
And
You're not gonna need the
and the
language.
specifics of the horrors were they bought a motorcycle for their dad, and their first day out, their dad turned left and they turned right, and the semi hit the
Right,
dad.
right.
And that is a story, and that is a detailed individual story, and that is a unique person that went through that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there is no generic label for that.
Sure. It's terrible.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. It's terrible.
yeah,
Got it. Yes.
yeah,
How do you heal it? That becomes the question.
yeah. Well, there are new technologies coming down the pike. Um, there's ketamine, there's which I think has special roles in helping the dysthymia emerging from PTSD, I believe,
Sure.
from what I have
There you
seen.
go.
There's
Spravato. I know of it. Yeah.
mushrooms and psilocybin.
Ooh, okay.
Probably offers a lot. And I'm the biggest Nelly naysayer, on anything new, especially if it's a former drug of abuse or a psychedelic and things like that,
Sure.
and Timothy Leary and all that. I'm very suspicious of anything new that comes along. But I got to admit, from what I have seen, um, that has promise too. But really, the core of it is the psychotherapy, and the psychotherapy
Mhm.
is always cathartic in nature, and it's taking the unconscious and making it conscious. And even though
Okay.
the person can consciously remember this and this and this happened to me traumatically, it was horrific, there's still an unconscious, like deep as an iceberg goes into the ocean level of unconscious meaning that trauma carries, even though consciously, yeah, my dad was hit by a semi.
Yeah.
Underneath that, all these various things, what it branches to. I'm unlovable. I'm this, I'm that. Who knows what's
Yes.
down there? And
Yes.
what EMDR and things like it, EMDR, inner child work. And
Yep.
frankly, it's probably what Freud was doing from day one was
I agree.
EMDR with his
I
gold
agree.
watch, waving the gold watch, hypnotizing. It's exactly what he was doing.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
why it seems so miraculous and is so miraculous, because it's mining the unconscious connections over this experience of the horrific, which
Yes.
is trauma, and giving words to it, which is what? Labels, thousands of labels maybe
Yeah.
to the components of the trauma, and
Yep.
ultimately to the self-cognition, meaning, who am I? The original philosopher's question, who am I? It's in the movie Wanted with James McAvoy and Angelina Jolie. He
Right.
says to her, she says to him, "Why are you here for your initiation training?" And James McAvoy says, "I don't know. I don't know." And she goes, "Why are you here?" And she keeps punching him. Angelina Jolie does. "Why are you here?" And he goes, "I don't know." "Why are you here?" And he's getting bloodied. "I don't know." "Why are you here?" And he finally says, breaking down in tears, "Because I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am." And when you have had trauma and have suffered the horrific, for a time, you may feel as if you don't know who you are anymore, or you wonder if who you were was false.
Right.
Why did that happen to me? But what will get built of you, and by your trauma therapist will
Yeah.
be the real you, the essence of the real you that always was there all along and will go on into the future until the day you expire. The real you will be what comes out of your trauma treatment.
I
Yeah.
like that. I think that's a really good place for to probably wrap it up for now. I will say this. I think it's too hard for me to resist saying
Yeah.
smart people. I've had smart clients. I've had clients all across the standard deviation of IQ. I'll put it that way. And many of my intelligent clients struggle with overthinking. I understand overthinking. Now, overthinking is on a spectrum, I think. Like, I guess you could just say it's the spectrum of thinking. You either under or over. But if you're in the over zone for so long, I think one of the ways that you fight it is through, of course, the kind of analogy of the Gordian knot where Alexander the Great just cuts through it instead of taking it on its own terms. And
Yeah.
so regression in service of the ego, regression
Indiana
into,
Jones, the guy with
yeah,
the
the gun.
sword,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Indiana Jones and the gun. Yeah.
I mean, for me, play, whether that's going to a comedy show, whether that's, and we talked about the adaptive nature of humor as an antidote to intellectualization, to a
Yeah.
fun plug for
Yeah.
one of our past shows.
Yeah.
Um, but horror movies, things that get you in your body that make you have an embodied experience and that pull you into the fun, the spontaneity of the present moment are such a great way to get through the noise of who am I, imposter syndrome, this and that. And people just keep asking these questions and get caught in this loop. And it's like, okay, let's play. let's pretend that it doesn't matter if you're an imposter, and let's get in a problem-solving situation with a game or an EMDR reprocessing scenario or something spontaneous, and let's have you be and behave and get back to your instincts even, and see where you lean in terms of your responses, and notice your proclivities, and that becomes, somewhat of an antidote. I think getting staying in the frontal lobe goes so far. You have to know what you don't know. And this idea of this terror people have now of who am I? I think we need to dedicate our next show to the terror of imposter syndrome because people overthink too
Yeah.
much. They overthink, and I know that's redundant to say they overthink too much. So I'm going to say they think too much slash they overthink because I mean
Right.
you never
Right.
see yourself the way others do. You are your ambitions, your knowledge, and your impulses. Like of course, you have a soul if you're Christian like me, you believe that, but, I mean, there's just it's too simple, to get caught in this loop of, "Ah, that wasn't me, it wasn't me." There's almost this epidemic of people wondering who they are and unraveling it today. I know it's been since time immemorial, but I mean, every other thing you see now is like, "I don't know who I am anymore," and I get tons of clients saying that. So, I don't know if you noticed that too, more than ever.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. I guess I could
Sign
say
it,
it's
not
more. I guess I
yeah,
could say it's more than ever. But the people we help are self-selecting for needing help, right? So we're going to see
of
those who
course.
who
Yeah.
who need it. As so to me, people ask me that about COVID. Like, was there a great rush of people into your office because of COVID? And I'm like, no. I mean, it's the same because
Sure.
it's the people that need the help.
That makes
Um,
sense.
but
I get
but
that.
yeah, but I do think as all these other authors are talking about social media and its influence on us, and the world of entertainment is so expansive now,
Bwah.
and video games and et cetera, Netflix. Where is the boundary between real and the imagination? And I could see it being easier to not know who one is in today's
Yes.
world as compared to decades past, let's say.
Don't worry, new solutions for new problems will be sure to come. Oh god. We'll figure it out. Alright, so I saw a question, it's hard for me to resist asking you this. So, um, we've got Nathan asking, "Do you think a blind person could be hypnotized?" I don't know that I have an answer. I think actually, I do, let me test it. I think that's
Yes,
possible.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what
Absolutely,
I was leaning
positively.
toward. Yeah, yeah, because 'cause they're not just relying I mean, if it were just eyes, the mind wouldn't play
With
into it at
touch.
all.
Right, you would I for years, maybe 10 years of doing EMDR for others, I don't do it so much anymore because of my role, but, I would tap them on the knee. They would put their hands on their knees,
Yeah,
and you could tap the backs of their hands alternately. Today, we have buzzers that just go off in the hands, but they're
yep,
sensory.
I use those. I use the
Yeah,
buzzers, yeah,
I think they're
yeah,
the best because then actually the person can close their eyes. I want them to close their eyes so they
I
can
like that too.
see the movie screen
Yeah,
of their
yeah,
past
yeah.
in their mind. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, so you nailed it. Yeah, I see that a lot with people, no pun intended. A lot of people prefer to close their eyes during EMDR, and that's fine if they have some other bilateral stimulation going on. There's self-tapping, there's buzzers,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got a light
Yeah.
bar. We for the eyes open. Most people I've had prefer tactile because it's just so it lets them get into it more. And there's conversation to be had on how much do you do that and how much do you not allow them to. Fine. That maybe is our another episode we could do
Let
on
me let me end with something
please.
I would hope would be inspirational since we've talked about Stephen King,
Yeah,
horror,
vampires.
real life horror, which is trauma,
Yeah,
vampires, zombies, werewolves, monsters, you name it. We've talked about it. If
yeah,
if it all comes down to monsters are those who are far more narcissistic than us. Nature can't really be so much of a monster. You just need to avoid as best you can hurricanes, typhoons, tornadoes, and blizzards and so forth. That's nature. It means us no harm or any good. But the
that sounds
real
like a
horror,
Tool song.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, yeah. If you want to take that down and record it, let's get that in the can. But I have some friends who could do that.
Oh yeah.
But it, if all of this business of monsters and Halloween and that which is horrific somehow ties to trauma and also somehow ties to the narcissistic machinations of others,
Hmm.
the most horrific things are done by humans to humans, right?
Yeah.
Stephen King's worst, most dramatic, horrifying things have been what humans can do. I just saw for no reason at all, it was on the TV. I forget where I was. Kathy Bates and James Caan, who's now deceased, in
Misery.
Misery, right? What a human can do to another human is the most horrific thing. Um, that
Yeah.
means, according to Horatio Fabrega, narcissism. And if you have trained to be a vampire hunter of the mind, and you recognize what manipulation is, what narcissistic fog is, what devaluation is by someone, what wrongful behavior, what immature behavior is, what boundarylessness is,
Yes.
what childish cruelty is, all of the things of that which is narcissistic, then you are a vampire hunter, so to speak, of the mind, of the psychology. And you have a duty to at least recognize it, avoid it if you can, do something about it if you can, and not be it and not become it.
Yeah.
So that's what I would
Man.
leave you with on our Halloween episode here.
Man, I hope this is the first of an
Hoo-ah.
annual. Oh, did you go?
Yeah, I went hoo
Yeah. You know what? I hope this is the first of an annual tradition, and I would not be opposed to doing something in person where we absolutely scare the ever-loving bleep so much out of an audience. Oh man, listen, I'm all about it. I could talk and talk about this. So I love it. And I think it's very inspirational. I would agree. Notice the danger, the warning signs. Don't split off from your group and make the rookie horror movie mistake of going it alone,
Right.
and stay safe out there.
Never go in the basement when you hear spooky music.
Yeah,
You should never do that.
agreed.
All right.
It was
Thanks,
amazing.
Jeremy. Yeah, it's been great. I'll
Catch you
talk
on
to you
the
again
next
soon.
one. Yes,
You got
if
it.
you dare.
Ooh,
All
ah.
right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.